Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this fine world. Scott St. Bucci, that's me. Today's episode is a little bit of an experiment. So here's what I want to do. Every month I run what's called a live sales Q&A. It's a open forum webinar for anybody that wants to join and ask whatever sales question they've got. It could be a question about their prospecting, about their pipeline pull through, building teams, managing teams, SDR metrics, whatever sales related topics come up, I answer them. And so we've been doing this for a couple of months now, going back into about the middle of last year. And the most recent one that we did, I thought was particularly interesting because it's a topic, lots of topics are ones that come up pretty frequently. In this particular case, there were 3 topics that came up, which were pretty top of mind for a lot of people out there. And so like all of our webinars, we record those and we have the audio. So I thought, hey, why don't I see if I can get the word out to more people about this, the topics that we covered in the live sales Q&A. And so what we're going to do is take the audio from that webinar and we're going to post it here as a podcast. So a couple of things to keep in mind as you listen to the webinar. You're obviously listening to a webinar. Now, lots of audio there. Every once in a while, I'm drawing a picture or a model on my whiteboard on my iPad. But most of the stuff that I'm drawing is pretty basic. I think you can follow along or at least picture it in your mind if you're listening. And so if you just kind of treat this as an opportunity to pull in some information that I'm sharing with other people, just imagine that you've asked the same questions or you've got the same questions that they have, and it's me answering those questions. So in this particular episode, we covered 3 main topics. So the first topic that we covered was cold calling. When to cold call, is cold calling dead, how to cold call, how to think about cold calling as part of an outreach sequence. And so certainly tackled the question of cold calling in general. More so, what we did is talked about, and what I talked about was the importance of outbound calling. I don't call it cold calling because I think there's no reason to do a pure cold call anymore. But I think of it as warm calling. And so we talked about how to use warm calling as part of a multi-touch omni-channel sales engagement sequence. So that was the first topic that we covered. The second topic that I covered in this live sales Q&A was on partnerships, when to use partnerships and how to use partnerships as part of your sales funnel at your startup. And in particular, there's 3 different places where you can use partnerships based on prospecting and lead gen as being one. The second one being in your sales pipeline to co-sell or resell your product. And third, on the customer success integration side of your business. So we talked about in detail those 3 parts of your sales funnel and how partnerships could be part of what you're doing to both distribute your product and, of course, sell and to support your product. And the third topic that we talked about was how to assess an account executive. More specifically, how do we know if somebody is the right fit? How do we know that somebody is motivated by the right things to make sure that they're a good match culturally with our startup and for our startup as it relates to our vision, mission, and values of our company, not just are they the kind of person that can sell my stuff. So those are the 3 big topics that we covered in the live sales Q&A. And so what we're going to do is take the audio, pop it in here. You can listen, and I'd love to get your feedback. If you feel like this is a good way to redistribute that information and redistribute that content that we're doing live in our live sales Q&As, then I can certainly pop more of these into the podcast so that if you're listening on your commute, listening in your car, maybe as you're shopping in Trader Joe's, it's one of the places I listen to podcasts all the time, is when I'm piling up my cart with bananas and avocados and frozen food that only my son will eat. Those are great places for me to consume podcasts and information. So maybe it's the same for you. And if this is a way for us to get more content, more information, and more ideas to you, the startup founder and the startup sales leader, then by all means, I'm happy to do it as part of our podcast sequence. So, okay, I think that's enough of the introduction. 2 asks that I'll make of you. One ask is that if you are listening to this podcast and you are what I call a repeat offender, probably tells me that you're really liking the content. And if you do like the content, please leave a review on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you might this episode. I would love to hear or love to see a review. It helps other people just like you to find the podcast and helps us to increase the number of people that are listening and downloading and subscribing to what we're doing here. So that's number 1. Number 2 is if you would tell a friend or 10 about this podcast, that would be awesome. Word of mouth is still the best way to get the distribution of this content out to more and more people. So if you've got a startup founder, maybe somebody on your team that could benefit from and would benefit from all the stuff that we're sharing here on the Startup Selling Show, please tell them, ask them to subscribe or at least listen to one episode and give it a shot. So that's it. Without any further ado, we're going to hop over to the recording of this month's live sales Q&A. The first minute or two is me kind of, well, frankly, fumbling around with the tech issues that we all face whenever we're trying to hop on a webinar. But once we get going, then we're off and running. And I think you're really going to enjoy and benefit from the content and the ideas that I'm sharing. So that's it for now. Let's head over to this experimental episode of the Startup Selling Show. Thanks so much for listening and look forward to the next episode. See ya. In the meantime, some of the other questions that I've got here are, what is the most overlooked question in the qualification phase of the sale? So I think the downstream effect here, when you're talking about lead qualification, is that oftentimes we get in a situation where we've done a discovery call, we've done a product demo, and then things go dark. And oftentimes people wonder, like, why did it go dark? Well, most often the reason it went dark wasn't about the product, wasn't about the price, it wasn't about any of that. It was that actually the lead wasn't qualified in the first place. So we can talk about lead qualification. Another question, and I've seen this quite a bit, there's some good chatter on LinkedIn around this particular topic, which is, does cold calling work? And as a corollary to that, what if it's really hard to get the decision maker on the phone? I just came from the Unleash conference, which is a conference hosted by Outreach, which is a company that has a sales engagement platform, and lots of really good specific tactical sessions talking about when and how to use the phone as part of your sales engagement sequence. So that's another topic. So we have lead qualification and specifically what questions tend to get overlooked. Cold calling is another one. And the third one that let me just scroll here, was actually related to sales engagement, which is when and how to engage with. When, meaning like how frequently should I be engaging with a prospect? How, meaning email, phone, LinkedIn, and how do I intersperse that as part of what we call a multi-touch omni-channel strategy. So those are a couple of the topics that have been kind of top of mind. If you've got any other topics or any other questions, we can certainly cover those. But in the meantime, I think what I'll do here is I want to start with the cold calling question, and more specifically, just sort of think about the question of using the phone as part of your sales sequence. So typically when we use that term cold calling, that's, I think a lot of us have in our mind this idea of, I've got a phone book and I'll start with the A's and work through the Z's and just start smiling and dialing. And so I actually prefer the concept not of cold calling, but instead think of it, instead of cold calling, as warm calling. And even if the person that you're calling is not expecting your call, there's still lots of ways for us to turn that purely cold call into a warm call of sorts. And what I mean by that, there's a couple of different ways that we can turn the cold call into a warm call. So two areas. First is research. And so because all of our lives, both professional and personal, at least for most of us, are online, it is just way too easy for us to find information about any person that we're going to contact. And so, oftentimes when people ask about like, how do I cold call? How do I do that initial outreach? Well, the very first thing you want to do is just make sure you're doing your research about the person that you're calling. It sounds pretty silly. It sounds pretty fundamental, but too often, I get calls on my cell phone, now, and voicemails on my cell phone, and clearly the person has not spent a single minute understanding who I am, what I do, and what my company does. They're just going through a script. They're going through a list because I was on some list because I'm on AngelList or Crunchbase, or they found me on LinkedIn, and they're just calling. They're doing the pure smiling, dialing. And so by research, one of the things the place that you want to start, I usually kind of think about research in three ways. So if you've got your contact, or you got the person that you want to call, we'll just call them your contact or your prospect. There's kind of three parts of research that I think if you follow these three steps, that will help you both, one, to get the right amount of information, and two, make sure that you get the right amount of information in a short period of time. One of the things the good news about having everything online is that everything is there. You can find it. You can collect that information. The downside to having everything online is that there's so much information that oftentimes as salespeople, or especially if you're managing a team of sales development reps, your sales development reps feel like, oh, I'm doing all this research. I'm getting ready to do these calls. And then 2 hours later, they've only done research and they haven't ever picked up the phone. And so when you're doing your research, you kind of think about it in 3 different ways. So I think about it as the person themselves. And so that's as easy as just going to LinkedIn and just getting clear about who that person is. Like, what is their title? Where else have they worked? What conferences, for example, might have they attended recently? People will often update their profiles, or oftentimes, especially if we're calling higher in the organization, sometimes those people may have been speakers or panelists or presenters at conferences. So using LinkedIn, getting clear on the person and their background is the first step. The second is then thinking of the company. So where does that person fit into the greater organization? And what does that company do? Like, what is that company's products? And what is the company's strategies? Who are the company's customers? Do you even know who that company is selling to? Like, we want to sell to, IBM, or we want to sell to General Electric or some business division within those big companies. Do you know, have you gotten really clear about what those companies, who are they selling to? Because as we're selling our product or our service, it's really, really critical that we're thinking downstream. How are we going to help them increase their revenue? Or how are we going to help them reduce their cost of production? How are we going to help them remove risk or increase efficiency? So the more we can understand more about the company, then the better it is, the better the information is, that as we're talking with eventually that person or doing the call, we're going to be prepared to do that. So it's the person, the company, and then the third is the problem. Meaning that, as you think about the product that you sell, what is the problem that you solve? And specifically, how does that company have that problem? Or would they, would they be likely to have that problem? So thinking about it from a company standpoint, and then also thinking about it, bringing it all the way back to the person or to the contact. How does that person fit into the problem, and how are they responsible for contributing to the solution to that problem? So when you think about going back to, like, is cold calling dead, or should I do cold calling? Step one is, yes, you should call people on the phone. That's first and foremost. Step two is it should be more of a warm call that starts with doing the right research. And if you're not sure about how to do that research, then just think about this really basic model of person, company, problem. If you kind of cover the bases on those 3 things, then you'll get into a flow where you find the person, do the research on the company, and then think about their problem. And once you've done those 3 things, then you'll have a pretty clear view of who you're calling and why you should be calling that person. So that's the very first part of thinking about this cold calling or warm calling strategy. The second main piece to think about this, when I think about cold calling or reaching out to people, it's not a one call fits all kind of approach, or just knowing that, hey, if I'm calling a high level executive, the chances are that they're going to answer the phone at their office is pretty small, right? Unless you happen to catch them at their desk and you catch them off guard, and they're the kind of person that doesn't mind answering the phone for a number that they don't know. So instead of like focusing only on like, what am I going to say in that call, then as part of that calling strategy, you want to think of it as part of a sequence, so that the call is one of many touches or one of several touches in an entire outreach sequence, so that even when you get voicemail, or even when you end up with an assistant on the phone, you're not relying only on that one action. You're not relying on only in that one interaction to be what will propel that person to take the return action that you want them to take. And so instead, we want to think of cold calling, or in this case, warm calling, as part of, and this is something we actually just covered this week in our startup selling program with some of our clients, introducing and talking through this idea of multi-touch strategies and what is also known as omni-channel strategies. So I'm just do a really super short, basic version of what we're talking about when we say multi-touch. So omni-channel just means all channels. So we know that the phone is not the only channel that we can use to get in touch with our contacts, right? There's email, which most of us overuse, but there's also LinkedIn. There are groups, there are text messages, there's direct mail, there's physical objects that you can send to people. There are face-to-face meetings at conferences, events, and other professional groups. So, this idea of channels those are all different ways. Those are all different channels in which we can be doing our outreach to our customers. And so when we talk about omni-channel and thinking about multi-touch omni-channel, what we're really saying is, well, these are all of the ways where I could be finding that one executive that I want to target. I really want to talk to the CTO at that company as part of my account-based selling strategy. How am I going to set up my sequence, my outreach sequence, so that I am increasing my odds of getting in touch with that person and showing that person that I'm trying to reach them in multiple ways. So if we think about I'm just use a really basic, in this case I'll do a 5-touch, meaning 5, this is the multi-touch sequence, 5-touch omni-channel sequence. So your first touch could be simply an email, right? Which is, email introduction. Hey, I saw that you're the CTO at blah, blah company, researching your company and saw that you spoke at XYZ conference. When you spoke, you mentioned that your company is struggling with this problem, or you mentioned that in your industry, this is a big problem for your customers. And so I'm getting in touch because we help companies just like you solve that problem, right? That's just a super easy script that you could use as at least an initial email. It's sort of like sending out the flare. Maybe they get in touch with, maybe they reply back, maybe they don't, but at least that's the first step in this multi-touch sequence. Now, this is where when we talk about cold calling and warm calling and using the phone, one of the key areas of that email that you want to add is what I call permission. And what specifically you want to do is give yourself permission to follow up. So what I mean by that is you say, craft that email, personalize it, send it off. And then at the end say, oh, by the way, I know you're really busy and you may not always check your email. So I will give you a call in the next couple of days to follow up. So what you've done is you've given yourself permission to follow up with that person in a second channel, right? So maybe that second touch is a phone. So if this is day 1, then maybe day 2, you follow up with a phone call. And in that phone call, hey, CTO, I sent you an email yesterday, so I'm following up as I said that I would to make sure that you got the message because I saw that you spoke at this conference and you talked about this problem, and this is the problem we solve for our customers. So if you're interested in learning more, we'd love to take 15 minutes to talk. So I see the chat, by the way. I'll come over to that in just a second. So now what you've done is this phone call, getting back into the sequence, right? The phone call is not a pure cold call. Like couple things have happened. One, it's part of a multi-touch sequence. So you sent them the email and then you're following up with a phone call. So it's not just the first call that they're getting or the first contact from you. Secondly, because you've done your research up here, you know who the person is, you know what their company is, and you know what the problem is. Now that phone call is not just, hey, we work with CTOs that need blah, blah, blah. Call me if you want to learn more. You've actually configured or customized that message. And so this is a way to think about how and when to use the phone in your sequence. And then the third, just to kind of carry on this multi-touch sequence, maybe the third is then a follow-up email on day 4, maybe in day 5. That's maybe perhaps where you want to send a note on LinkedIn, whether that's an email because you've already kind of effectively, in some sense, warmed them up. John, I sent you an email. I'm not sure if you saw it, so I thought I'd try you here on LinkedIn. So you could send a message on LinkedIn with an email, or you could simply send a connection request. There's lots of different ways and different styles. We actually have a whole about 10 modules of training just on using LinkedIn for outreach. So I'm not going to get into the details of that right now. But thinking about an omni-channel strategy, your fourth touch, you got email, phone, email, LinkedIn. Now you've got 3 channels in which you are contacting that person. And then, your fifth touch in the sequence could be another email. Maybe that's on day 7. And there's lots of experimentation you have to do in terms of figuring out frequency and gaps and testing how many emails versus phone calls. And so you could easily extend this out into 10 touches, right? So maybe, day 10 is another phone call. One thing you could do, and this is something that we've been experimenting with, is in parallel to the digital sort of outreach, whether that's phone or email or LinkedIn, maybe one of the things you could do is on day 3, you could send a direct mail, like an actual physical letter. Remember those? The stamp, And so when they get when they get that direct mail, maybe they get the direct mail is received, say on day 8. You can send a priority email or something like that on day 3. So they're going to have it by day 8 as part of that omni-channel multi-touch sequence. Now it's email, phone, LinkedIn, and I got this letter. Like, who's sending me this letter? Oh, wait a minute. I think I saw some emails on that, right? And so on and so forth. So you want to just think about the where and when to use all of these different channels, and more so going back to the main question here, which is when to use phone. The phone is a piece of this multi-touch omni-channel strategy, and each time you're doing that phone call, it's never cold, it's warm in some way. So that's the sort of the crux of how I would think about cold calling. Step 1 is, again, don't think of it as cold calling, think of it as warm calling. The way you make it a warm call is always do your research, which is step 2. And then third is think about when to use the phone as part of a multi-touch omni-channel sequence. So it's not just relying on that one call, hoping that one call, that one voicemail, that one message with the assistant is going to get them to, the clouds are going to open up and, heaven is here. And oh my God, I was waiting for this call so that somebody could solve this problem for me. I'm definitely going to call this guy back. It's going to be part of that multi-touch sequence, which could be 5 touches or 10 touches. And at the Unleash conference, they showed some sequences that are as many as 30 touches, 20 to 30 touches over a 30 to 45 day period, depending on the lead and the type and the situation. Again, all that varies based on your product, based on is that an inbound lead versus an outbound account that you're targeting, and a lot of other factors. But this is just sort of some models to be using and to think about. I should mention, by the way, the work that we do, obviously, we're working with startups all the time as part of our work here at Sales Qualia. And so we have our coaching program. And one of the things we've done is that we're in working with our clients. One of the things that we realized that we've learned over the years is that this very top of the funnel activity, obviously it's the most crucial, because if you can't get somebody to reply back to you, if you can't get them on a call, if you can't get them on a demo, if you can't get them to engage with you, then there's no sale. It doesn't matter how good the product is. It doesn't matter how good the rest of your sales process is. If you can't get them into step 1, then you're never going to get the sale. And so we've built out a program called Fill the Funnel that we're launching in the first week of April, that we're filling up those seats. So it's a 10-week program. And so we just started letting our tribe know about this. So whether you're already a client or you're not a client but of Startup Selling, but you are looking for some help filling the funnel over the next 10 weeks, then this could be a really good opportunity for us to work together and for you to fill your funnel in that short period of time now in the spring, and then also build out the system and the repeatability that you're going to need to fill your funnel for the next 10 years. So if you're interested in learning more, you can just type in funnel, send me a direct message, send me an email with the word funnel, and we'll send you the details. So let's go over to the chat box here. And I've got Carl's question. Let me just take a quick look here. So, first there's a follow-up. Carl's asking, is there a sweet spot for touch points? Great question. So is there a sweet spot? Yes and no. It depends. So the data out there supports, if we think about number of touches on a spectrum, right? Or starting from, touch 1 And then you have all these different touches, assuming you've built out an omni-channel strategy. And as part of that omni-channel strategy, there's a combination, obviously, email, phone, LinkedIn, direct mail, conferences, all that stuff. The data supports that the number of touches required is roughly a binomial, meaning that what you'll end up, I do better than that. What you end up seeing is that if somebody is, truly kind of a hot lead, or somebody who truly is interested to engage with you, then those first couple of touches will do the trick. So if it's an inbound lead, sometimes you do have to get in touch with an inbound lead 2 or 3 or 4 times just to get them to reply back or book a meeting or schedule a call, whatever that is. I know I've gone to websites, filled out forms, and then that salesperson had to send me 3 or 4 messages or send me a couple emails and then a voicemail to get me to reply back and book that call, right? But if somebody's keen to learn more, the first few touches will work. And the same with outbound, actually. So if you've done a really good job of getting narrow on your target market, you know exactly who the buyers are, who are the decision makers, the stakeholders, the people that are out to solve the problem that you solve with your product, and you're really, really clear about that value proposition. If you've done a good job of doing all of that research before you start blasting emails out, then again, oftentimes the person that receives that message, or the first couple of messages, they're like, okay, this person's talking my language. Turns out I do have this problem and I definitely want to learn more. So people are just going to sort of like jump on those first few touches. And it's oftentimes takes more than one, but usually the first 5, within the first 5, somebody will then engage. But then what we see is sort of this, kind of a little, I don't know if you want to call it maybe the dead zone. So we'll call this the hot zone, right? So they're keen and they're interested. And then you have kind of this dead zone where people have not, so you're continuing to engage with them as part of that sequence. People have not said to you, stop emailing me, stop calling me, I'm not interested, right? If they say that, obviously you want to, stop, with the campaign. But if you're continuing to send messages and people aren't taking action or not doing anything, then oftentimes what we end up seeing is that at the much later number of touches, as many as 15 or 20 touches, is what then gets them on the phone again. And so it's just this persistence. And that's why having this multi-touch approach and this omni-channel approach is so critical, because if you don't have those sequences built out and the emails, for example, if you have, let's call it a 20 touch sequence, and let's say 12 of those are emails, those emails can't all be, hey, following up, hey, check it in, hey, wanted to see if you got my message, hey, are you interested? The emails also have to include value. So that could be, sending off white papers, it could be inviting people to webinars that you're hosting, inviting people to your conference booth, asking if they're going to a conference. So these are not just quick follow-up, check-in, see if you're interested emails. There's a lot of work that goes into those emails as part of your authority voice and part of the campaign that you're doing. And so if you persist through those 20 touches, then oftentimes you'll get a second sort of pop in terms of response rates. And the same holds, again, not just for outbound, but also for inbound. Oftentimes you might get somebody who filled out a form, they said they're interested, they might have even booked a demo with you or booked a call, and then they no-showed, right? It's definitely happened to me in 20 some years of selling. I'm sure it's happened to you. And so our job is to then continue to follow up and ask them, maybe a fire, a metaphorical fire popped up in their company, right? They were keen to learn more. They were ready to take action on this problem that your product solves. So they came across your site, they learned about you at a conference, or somebody referred them to your site. They went over there, filled out the form. They're all keen, all ready to learn. And then all of a sudden, the day of the demo, something else crashed. Their server crashed, or 3 people on their team left, or their CEO told them that they have to now focus on this thing over here, or they open up a new market, or a product launch got delayed. Who knows what happened over here. So all of a sudden they were all set to take action here. And then it was like, and they had to run in another direction. Doesn't mean that they're not still interested. It's just that they weren't able to take action right away. And that's why having, even on an inbound lead, this multi-touch, not interested, not responding sometimes is not that they're not interested. It's just it's not a now thing. And so continuing to persist over that long period of time. I mean, we've seen this a lot of times. I had somebody who was interested in joining the program here, and a couple of weeks went by, very keen, like all ready to go. And then it was like, oops, like nothing happened. And so I just sent her a quick video message. Hey, this is Scott, here, just wanted to, let you know we're here. Whenever you're ready, you just let me know. And the response I got was all these details. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here's what happened. This happened and this and this. I'm totally still interested. Let's talk again in a couple of weeks. I'm like, okay, cool. So no response does not mean not interested. It just means oftentimes not right now. So because we had this sequence, I knew after a couple of weeks of dark, if I send a video message, that oftentimes people do get back to me, then boom, now we know. So I think that answers your question there in terms of sweet spot for touch points. And yeah, it is repeatable if you have a combination of the right system in place and you've got the right touch points with the right information and the right giving people ways to engage with you in a way that isn't just, do you want to buy the product or do you want to see a demo? So let's go over to the question we've got above here, short version. Yeah, you're welcome. Are reseller relationships typical harder to develop than direct sales? Should they be parked if sales bandwidth is limited? Great question. So we just did actually in February, we did a training on partnerships in our program. So this is a really timely topic. And the way that I like to think about partnerships and how and when to use them kind of starts with our basic model for your sales process. So just for keeping things simple, because I like to do that if possible, we have 3 parts of your sales process. There's prospecting, which is just lead gen, right? You're trying to get leads into your sales funnel. Then once those leads go through qualification, just kind of this line in the process, right? Once they're qualified, then they become sort of part of your sales pipeline and they become an opportunity, right? They're qualified and you take them through step by step, all of the steps, whether it's 3 or 23 or 103 steps to go from qualified lead to paying customer. And that's the third piece, which is going from sales opportunity in your pipeline to actual conversion, right? They become paying customers. And then they become not just customers, but all of the work that you're doing is implementing, training, onboarding, and then the long-term customer success path, looking for ways to first retain them, and then looking for ways to upsell them as your product and your relationship grows. So these are kind of the 3 main parts of your sales process. So when you think about partnerships, we can have partnerships that either work specifically in one of these 3 areas of your sales process, in the prospecting side, the pipeline side, or the customer side, the paying customer side, or you could certainly have them span across. So typically what I recommend with our clients is the first place you want to start is here at the top under prospecting or lead gen. And so the idea here is whether it's something as simple as a referral partnership where you have it could be an organization, it could be another product, it could be a service, a consulting company or consulting agency that calls on the same clients as you, and they uncover the problem you solve when they're working with their clients, but they don't solve it because maybe they're a service-based company. Then you could have say, hey, when you come across this problem, just refer them over to us, do a quick introduction, and then we'll take it from there. So it's the easiest, lightest way to start setting out partnerships. And what this does is effectively, if you think about your sales funnel, what we've done in a lot of ways just by creating a partnership around lead gen is we've kind of moved the sales funnel. We've widened the sales funnel because now we potentially have more leads coming in from this partnership channel, right? In this case, referrals. Now, you can get more formal with the lead gen and the ways that people are referring business to you. So it's not just referrals. It could be, and this is something where we've had some clients have had a lot of success doing this, where they might do, for example, webinars, where you're actually adding value to one of your partners' communities. So we did this when I was at Altos Research, where we had different real estate organizations that wanted us to come in and do a webinar for their group. So as an example, there's a group called the Institute of Luxury Home Marketing, ILHM. So the Institute of Luxury Home Marketing is an organization that works with real estate agents that only sell luxury properties. So whether you're in Indianapolis or Santa Monica, if you're selling properties that are the top 10% of your market area, you're considered a luxury home agent, in which case you're allowed to join this organization, right? And so the work that we did with them as a partner is once a quarter, they would say, look, you've got all of this really great real estate data. And because our membership, you're selling luxury homes, the people they're selling to are executives and people that are very data driven. They're business people oftentimes. And so it'd be really great if you could teach our group about how to use market data in their listing presentations when they're working with buyers that are coming in from out of town, just so that they can teach their buyers what the market trends are. And so for us, like, yeah, no problem. So we could slap together a webinar, and it took me like maybe an hour or two to put together a little presentation. We just pull out some data from different places, teach them a couple of things about things like correlations of days on market with price, or looking at inventory levels relative to time to sale, and do a 30, 45 minute webinar. And so tons of value for their community, because now they're getting access to information and education that they didn't get otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And then for us, at the end of the webinar, we had a really simple call to action. We're like, hey, this has been really great. Thanks so much for joining. As a reward to you for spending some time with us, if you would like us to send you a market report for your local area, just click here and fill out this form. Tell us, where you're selling properties, what zip code that you're selling in, and we'll pull out a report and then email it to you. And so that's a case where we were able to get a lot of pull through that partnership, because people just spent 30 minutes learning about market trends and how important it was and how to use it. Well, who better to help them on a day-to-day basis than Altos Research? And so it was a way for us to generate new leads. But it wasn't just like, it wasn't a situation where ILHM said, well, if we hear of any agents that are looking for market data, we'll refer them over to you. We actually had this partnership set up where once a quarter, we had these on the calendar. They would drive attendance. It was a reward. It was actually huge value for their members, because those members, as part of their membership fees, were getting access to these webinars that weren't available anywhere else. So great value for the partner. And then, of course, great value for us, because we were able to generate leads for our business. So those are just a couple of examples. And you can think about partnerships at the very top of the sales funnel. Now, where it gets a little trickier with partnerships is as you start moving down into the sales funnel, because in the case of when you start talking about your sales pipeline, what you're really asking people to do is co-sell, or even do the selling and distribution for you. So that's a partnership where you say, look, here's our product. And as you're talking to your customers, if you uncover that they have this problem that we can solve, here's how you sell it. So you sell it for us. Now, that can be particularly challenging for a startup, because as startups, even if you're doing a couple $1 million in revenue, you're still kind of trying to figure out how to sell your stuff. And even if you do know how to sell your stuff in one vertical, it doesn't mean that you would be able to sell it really well in a second vertical. So as you start selling up these co-selling and distribution partnerships, or reselling in this case, so co-selling means that they might bring you in and you help them sell to their customers. Reselling is where they're just flat out selling it for you. So these can be a little trickier if you're not really, really clear and really precise on how your product gets sold. And so one of the things that I'll go back to Altos Research. One of the things we found a really effective reseller for us, and this took us about 3 or 4 years to figure this out, a good reseller for us turned out to be a company that was building websites for real estate agents. And the reason they were a good reseller is because as part of our marketing package that we sold to real estate agents, we had an online lead generation form, and then we had these real-time market charts. So as our data updated, we update the data on their website. So if you're a real estate agent, you always had real-time market data on your site, which made you a lot more valuable to your constituents, to your potential buyers and sellers. And so when a real estate agent was going through a website redesign, that was the best time for them to think about using Altos, because then the web developer could say, well, as part of the new website, we'll have this whole market research or market trends page, and we'll populate that page with all the Altos research charts. And then we'll have a nice lead gen there so somebody could request a report, and then your Altos engine will then send the report automatically. So the agent's like, oh my God, this is awesome. And so what we did in that case, instead of co-selling, where the website agency said to us, well, if we kind of warm people up and they're interested, then we'll send them to you and then you can sell them on the subscription. What we did is we said, well, look, why don't you just include Altos as part of your website package? And that way we don't have to kind of fuss around. It will, increase adoption because it's just included. They could opt out if they wanted to, but most people didn't. And it reduced the friction and the time to get that up and running. And so what we did with that web agency is we said, we're going to sell you our subscriptions at a discount, basically wholesale pricing. And then when you price in your website redevelopment package, you just include Altos as part of it. And so that agent is getting a deal. So our list prices were like $79 and $149 a month for our 2 subscriptions. And so we sold it to the web developer for something like $29 and $49 or something like that. So for us, we had no customer acquisition costs, no setup cost. All we had to do was sell them in I think we did them in batches of 10. So we told the website agency you have to buy them 10 at a time. So we'd set up these accounts and just have the account number as the custom field. And so anytime that agency was setting up a new website, they just had to grab that code. Then Altos subscription was live for that agent. And so for us, we did no work and got $29 per subscription. And for their customers, it was a huge amount of value add. But that took us a few years to get to that point. And the most important thing is we got revenue no matter what, meaning that the reseller was buying from us at wholesale and then reselling it. So we were not in a situation where we would only make money if they sold it. We're like, no, you get this stuff at a discount. So you have to buy it from us in bulk, so to speak. And so, yeah, lots of trust does need to get developed. And that's why I said it took us 3 or 4 years to get there. So the first time we rolled this out was with a web agency who we did get to know through technology conferences. There's an Inman real estate tech conference every year, twice a year. So we see those people there. Turns out we realized we had a lot of the same customers. So we'd be at our booth, and this woman, Chris from San Diego, was at our booth. And then Jim Marks, who ran the digital agency, he was at our booth like, oh, good to see you, Chris. I'm like, oh, you know Chris? Like, yeah, she's a client of ours. I'm like, oh, she's a client of ours too. And we started to see there was a lot of this overlap. And so it came in a very sort of organic, slow way. We didn't set out and go, okay, geez, I wonder who could resell our stuff. I bet you website agencies. Let's make a list of all the agencies and then just start trying to sell them on reselling our stuff. So, because that would have been really, really hard. So the last place that in the training that we did with our clients on partnerships was on the paying customers. Think about it as integration. So an example there would be once a customer gets up and running, or once they make the purchase, oftentimes there's configurations or training or integrations with. So as an example, when I was at Blend selling enterprise software to banks, banks like NationStar and Wells Fargo and all these others, it wasn't just buying and adopting our software. It was then really the real magic was then integrating our software with the 17 other systems where the data was coming in and had to get dispersed internally. So hooking up with their loan origination system, hooking up with their customer database, and hooking up with their personal records and all the other pieces and parts of the integration. And so while we had sales engineers that could do that work, we actually didn't really want to do a lot of that work. We might help with setup, but then long-term maintenance, we actually wanted to pass that off. And so we talked to companies like Cognizant and other third parties who were already embedded with those banks doing other technology consulting work. And we could say, look, Cognizant, once we get up and running and we get the initial set of integrations up and running, we're actually going to pass them off to you. And then they're just going to pay you to do the updates and any other new integrations. And so it was a way for us to partner with somebody that offloaded the demand for labor on our end to do all the integrations and maintenance over time. And it was great for them because then at the top,
If you go all the way back to the top of the funnel, now we're feeding them business at the integration side. If they're already embedded with these banks and they see and they're talking to business leaders that are looking for a solution to a problem that we solved at Blend, then they can go, oh, by the way, you guys should talk to Blend because we just did these integrations with this other business unit and the software is really great. They're getting great results. And so why don't we do an introduction? So in a lot of ways, it can come full circle when you have a good integration partner. And again, that requires you have good documentation, you have good process, and you've got a partner that you can trust that would have the same level of service that you would expect of yourself as a customer. So the model of co-selling transitions into pure reselling. So yeah, co-selling is oftentimes a good first step before reselling. And it can also be a good opportunity to do some experimentation. So if you're already selling, let's say you're selling your platform into the SMB segment, and you have a good amount of success selling your product to companies, and you're selling, $20,000, $30,000 ARR deals, you're able to go in there, sell the product, do pretty well, but your product is growing, right? You've got new features. You want to start moving up market. So you want to start, move out of just the SMB segment, but start hitting a bigger part of the market, or even like Fortune 500 part of the market. And that's where co-selling could be with a partner could be really effective, where you say, okay, look, we're going to partner with, use the example of Cognizant. So if Cognizant is in there and they are working with a Fortune 500 company and they see that there's a need, there's a problem that we solve with a product, then they would call us in and we would actually, Cognizant would be part of that sale. They would set up the meetings. They would be in the meetings. They would be part of the follow-up. So we're really working as a partner to sell to that executive on the other side. And then if that happens successfully over a couple of times, then those Cognizant salespeople could see, oh, this is how they sell it. These are the value propositions. This is how they handle objections. This is how they talk about integrations. And then you can slowly start to kind of take a step back as far as how involved you are in the sale, and to the point where eventually they might become resellers for you. So you definitely want to take this stuff slow. If you just sign a bunch of partnerships that people say, yeah, we'll sell your stuff, nothing will happen. So instead, I always recommend start here at the top of the funnel with referrals and ways to partner with people just to get lead gen so that you're opening up your funnel. And then you can start moving deeper and deeper into the sales process. That is partnerships. Let's see. We want to cover this. What is the most overlooked question in the qualification phase? So we're talking about lead qualification here. This is something I've talked about in a couple of different live Q&As that we've done. There's a couple of different ways you can think about what constitutes, what are the rules or what are the checks, the boxes you need to check in order to consider a lead. What are the right questions to ask to gauge a salesperson's true past performance? And what are the best questions to ask if the salesperson is highly ambitious and money driven? Okay, yeah, let's cover those. And then so the right questions to gauge a salesperson's true past performance, ask them for a W-2 or ask them for their tax returns. It's that simple because that is going to verify their income. And this might seem odd, like asking people for the tax returns. It's actually not that odd. I've had this happen to me when I was 23 years old. I was a salesperson for Prentice Hall Higher Education. I was basically selling textbooks to college professors. This is back in 1996. It's a long time ago. And I was looking at other opportunities. I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something else I want to sell. So I came across this job posting for another company. And I went through the first initial screening interview. And the guy asked me, well, what did you make last year? And I told him, and he didn't believe me. And I said, well, I was the number 5 rep in the company out of 300 salespeople. And he said, yeah, but you said that last year was your first year at the company. And I said, yeah, that's right. He said, well, how could you be the number 5 sales rep? I said, because I work my ass off. I know what I'm doing. I read a book a week. I'm on campus from 8 to 5 every single day. And I have a really good manager. And he still did not believe me. And he said, well, that might be true, but I'm going to need to see income verification. I was like, yeah, no problem. So I sent him a copy of I think it's called a W-2 or whatever it's called. And he was like, oh, Okay, I get it. And the reason he didn't believe me is because he knew that how many people said, oh, I'm a top performer, or I made this much money, or I have a 50 base, but I made 150 in commission. You know that there's a lot of BS out there. And so he just was surprised that somebody that was 23 years old could have made that much money their first year working in college textbook publishing. So that's one way to do is just ask them flat out. The second question, what are the best questions to ask if the person is highly ambitious and money driven? I think there's actually two parts to the question. So if you want to find out if they're highly ambitious or money driven, one of the things that we do with our clients, we have a behavioral assessment that we use. It's called Zero Risk. And Zero Risk is a way for you to objectively assess somebody's behavioral tendencies. So to be really clear, it's not a personality test. It's not an assessment that you use to make a hire or not make a hire. Like, oh, they scored a 7 out of 10, therefore I'm going to hire this person. It's not how you use it. What it does, though, is it allows you to look at how people tend to behave in certain situations. It measures their self-view, how they look at themselves in the world, and how they interact, secondly, with the rest of what's their world view. So it measures things like their intuition and empathy. It measures how results-oriented are they. It measures what's another I don't have it in front of me. So it measures intuition and empathy. It measures their self-view, how they view themselves as a person. Are they a confident person? Or are they overly confident? Or are they actually the kind of person that is not a very good promoter of themselves? And so this assessment looks at all of those different characteristics, all those different behaviors. And then when the person takes the assessment, it gives them a score and it just gives them a range. And there's no right or wrong answer. But what it does is it allows you to assess, for example, is somebody results oriented or not? Is somebody a driven accomplisher or not? And so what I've found in interviewing salespeople for 20 years and managing teams, and millions of other people have found, is that salespeople are really good at interviewing. And so they're going to tell you the answers that you want to hear. They're good at themselves. And I know this from personal experience. We had a salesperson when I was at Altos that we hired in New York City. He had great background, great experience, said all the right things. We put him in a position and it was a complete failure. And we had not yet used these assessments. We introduced these assessments after we hired that person. And after we started using the assessments, we not only started using with new candidates we were hiring, but we also went back and had everyone on our team take the assessment just so that we had a better understanding of each other and our own work styles. Because as a manager, like if I could see that Kristen, who ran customer success at the time, that she was the kind of person that was actually overly empathetic with customers. She's actually to the point of being sympathetic. She would apologize to people if they submitted a ticket and said, like, oh, listen, I forgot my password. Can you reset it for me? She would say, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me reset that for you. It's like, no, we didn't do anything wrong. Like they just forgot their password. So she was like actually overly sympathetic with people. But having that assessment done, I didn't realize that was the case. So we could then manage and say, well, listen, Kristen, there's different kinds of tickets here. You don't have to apologize. You can apologize if there's a bug, but you don't have to apologize if somebody forgot their password. And so just to kind of bring this full circle, using these assessments in an objective way that have been scientifically proven to give you a clear view of somebody's behavioral tendencies, it's called Zero Risk HR. If you just type in Zero Risk HR, you're welcome, you'll find it. So we have a partnership with Zero Risk. So with all of our clients, they actually get to use this assessment as part of their hiring process without a fee. So that's how much I believe in this particular product. I've used it at 3 different companies. So, yep. Thanks, Stephen. So what I would say is I don't think you can necessarily ask a question to see if somebody is highly ambitious or money driven. Instead, I would say use an assessment to identify. And then a good assessment, whether you use it Zero Risk or another one, a good assessment will then help you craft a question that can test that. Now, last thought on this. As a startup, I think it can be very dangerous at the early stage to hire somebody who is purely money driven. It'd be very dangerous. Yes, we want to grow. And yes, we want somebody who's out there to sell. But if you're in the earliest stage, you're getting your first 10 customers, even you're getting your first $1 million or a couple $1 million of revenue, there is going to be a lot of bumps in the road. And there's going to be a lot of stuff about the product that isn't done. There's going to be a lot of stuff about the process that isn't built out. there's going to be a lot of challenges, as you know, growing, ramping, scaling your company. And so if you hire somebody who's purely interested in money, then let's say, you do a product release and you go, great, we're going to sell this product, and the product release falls flat, or the product release gets behind, or the product release doesn't have all of the features that the market is asking for. Well, if you've got somebody who's purely money driven, they might either tell customers stuff that they want to hear in order to get a deal closed. Like, oh yeah, we're going to have that product feature. Don't worry. It's coming, when it's not, or it's not coming in any reasonable period of time. Or worse, that money driven person is going to see like, product release is not going well. It's going to be 4 more months before I can sell this stuff. Better start sending out resumes. I need to go find a place where I can make some money. And so at the earliest stage, you want people that are on board the mission, vision, values of the company and are willing to look not just at money today, but are willing to bet on equity and be part of your team and your culture. Because if you don't have that, you're going to have a lot of turnover, and that can be really negative to the rest of the team. And I can speak to personal experience on this in at Blend, for example, where I sold enterprise software. My base salary, my compensation was $100,000 a year for the first year. I left a job at CoreLogic where I was making over $300,000 a year as an executive. I left that company because it just was not the place I wanted to be. I wanted to be at Blend. I wanted to solve that problem. I wanted to work with that team. And so I literally took a third of the money I was making at CoreLogic, and I went from a 30-minute commute working in Sacramento to a 2.5-hour commute each way to San Francisco to go work at this company. So what you want at the earliest stage, the people that are on board with the mission, vision, and value, because if they're purely money driven, then it's just not going to work. Now, later on, when you're scaling and you need to grow really fast and you can pay big bonus checks and there's predictability in how you're getting leads and how leads should be closing and how the pricing works, sure, you definitely want to get those people on the team and get them to grow. But at the earliest stage, if you hire those people early, that can be really, really dangerous for your culture. Okay, cool. So hope that answered your question, Jess. Well, look, I think we're running up here towards a little bit past the top of the hour. I think it's a good place to stop. As I mentioned at the top of the conversation, if you're looking for some help to fill your funnel, like I said, we just launched this new program called Fill Your Funnel. We're going to be kicking off with the first group. It's going to be a small group of combination of SDRs at startups and startup founders that are doing the selling themselves that need to fill their sales funnel. And what we're going to be teaching are all of the key areas of building out your sales engagement and your funnel filling strategy. So a couple of specific examples, we're going to be looking at how to prospect on LinkedIn the right way, not just sending a bunch of spammy emails. We're going to be diving deep into this multi-touch omni-channel strategy as part of your sales sequence. We're going to look at outbound calling. We're going to look at the difference between how to handle inbound leads and outbound leads. We're going to look at lead qualification and building out your lead qualification questioning strategy so that you can qualify and disqualify leads within 12 minutes of a call. So there's just a couple of examples of what we're going to be covering in this program. It's a 10-week program. We have a combination of some of our clients that are already going to be participating in it with their SDRs. And then we're going to be inviting a couple of people from the outside that just need some help filling the funnel now. Because if we do that now, if you fill your funnel now in April, May, June, that's what's going to set you up for Q4. Because if you wait too long to fill your funnel, if you wait until the summer, things get tough in the summer because people just naturally slow down. And then all of a sudden you come back in September and you're trying to fill your funnel. Well, that's when big companies are at budget season. Really hard to get executives. And by the time you get the meetings in October, November, they're going to say, geez, I wish you could have gotten to me back in May because we just did budget for 2020. So why don't you come back to me in Q1 or Q2 of next year, and then we can talk about it. And so this timing is the exact right time to be thinking about how to fill your funnel and build out, most importantly, the repeatable systems. So that as you are growing, you can start to scale your team. You can sit an SDR in a seat and say, this is our multi-touch sequence. This is how you prospect on LinkedIn. This is how you qualify a call. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, you can either just send me an email, scott@salesquality.com. Just write the word funnel in there, and then we'll share some of the details. Or you can just click a link. Steven, just put a link into the chat box. So you can click there, find 15 minutes on the calendar. We'll ask you a couple questions about where you are and what you're looking to do, just to see if it's a good fit. And then if it's a good fit, then we can share some more of the details about the program. So I think that's it. So really good to do this. One of my favorite things to do every month. So thanks for joining the live sales Q&A. And again, we'll leave the chat box open here for just a minute or two. Definitely grab a time, even if you're not sure if the program's good for you. Click there. Let's spend a couple minutes on the phone, talk about it. If it's a great fit, it is. And if it's not, that's cool too. Probably worth 10 or 15 minutes for both of our time to see if we can help you fill your sales funnel. All right. Okay, guys. Thanks so much for joining. Appreciate it. And let's do it again soon. Okay. See ya.